the game ends. And you kind of sit there and kind of go, oh, well, I guess I gotta play 2. Because of course you gotta play 2. Mass Effect 2, it's like the best one in the series. People consider it one of the best RPGs.
Is that the best? I thought the 3rd was the best. Is that not the best?
Hey, we lost them here, and now there's an additional objective, so if you're exploring the caves or the lair or wherever, maybe you come across that, and you can turn that in, and it's an additional objective that might get you an additional reward. They don't tell you that what's more likely going to happen is you go, and you try to water them consistently, and then some of them just start to die, and other ones are fine. And then you have to ask yourself, like, what's possibly wrong? Alex, how does it feel to be in the land of the living?
Oh, it could be worse. I could be in the land of the make-believe.
Yeah, I could be in the zombie killing mode. I don't want that. No. I could be the zombie.
Yes. I think we're all zombies these days.
Yeah, that's what that Cranberries song taught me. Anyway, thank you for joining us on Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex.
And shamble along with us through these next 3 wonderful topics. Ooh, brains. Brains are not actually one of the topics. It's just...
No, we would need brains to talk about the brains.
Yeah, we know that this is a brainless show for everyone who's listening. Alex, you've probably experienced this once or twice, but I have faced it in my time as well, is the unwillingness, or let's say the procrastination of not actually finishing a game.
I don't call it the unwillingness to finish a game. I call it putting a game down and then, I'll get back to it.
You never end up picking it back up.
No.
No.
It's like when I set down Skyrim and I go, I want to play something else for a little bit. And I set down Skyrim and then I pick it back up and I go, oh, I have no idea where this character was. I guess I need to start a new character.
Yeah, and then you start from the beginning again.
And then I do it again.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, in Skyrim, have you ever completed the main quest line?
I made myself do that the last time I played.
Ah, good. Okay.
I sat down with the character, I made an orc that used heavy armor and 2-headed weapons, and I said, alright, the 2 things I want to accomplish in this character are beating the main quest line for the Civil War and the Dragonborn.
Yeah.
And I did.
That's a noble accomplishment. It only took how many years from when you originally played?
Many.
Yes. The thing that happened to me recently that was really weird, though, is that I've found myself procrastinating on not completing a game that I previously did complete, and that I'm going back to.
I feel like if it's a game you've already beaten once, then it's more okay to, just kind of go,
Yeah, you'd think so. But anyway, let me kind of give you an idea of where I'm at. What I'm talking about is actually a trilogy. It's the Mass Effect Trilogy. Recently, they released the Legendary Edition of the Mass Effect Trilogy, and the idea behind it was to take all 3 games that have now been out for over a decade, and to modernize them so that they, run on modern hardware, but they look better, update the interfaces a little bit, and also integrate all 3 of them in all of their content so that you can play from 1, import the character directly into 2, and 3, which was a little hard before just because it was in a time where they were moving through different console generations at the time. When I originally played the trilogy, I actually didn't play the first one before I played 2 and 3. And then later on, when they ported it to a system I did have, I played 1 retroactively afterward. So this was the first time that I was actually going to be able to create a character and then take all of the decisions specifically that I made in 1 and go through to 2 and 3. And I started with just the idea that I wanted to play the first one at least, and see how much better it was with the new upgrades. And so I did that, and I was like, oh, this looks great. Like, they really did a wonderful job making it look new, and the clarity on all the characters and the way that they made the land looks really good, and the game plays really well now. I forgot some of the, intricacies of how the game plays and the way they did, the upgrade systems and stuff. But for the most part, I really enjoyed that. So what happens is, I go through all the content in the first game, and I get through to the end, and I resolve the conflict at the beginning with Saren, and, the game ends. And you kind of sit there and kind of go, oh, well, I guess I gotta play 2. Because of course you gotta play 2. Mass Effect 2, it's like the best one in the series. People consider it one of the best RPGs.
Is that the best? I thought the third was the best. Was that not the best?
The third is a close second. I think the only reason why it ends up getting negative points is because of the ending.
Oh, the one where they're like, here's like 3 different endings that are all the same.
Well, that it kind of
they did.
It reduces the whole experience of like all of the things that you did to kind of a multiple choice choose your own adventure at the very end, which made people feel like the integration and why we did all of these things was a little muted, and then they had to go back and they had to add to the storyline, which I'll be interested to see now. But basically, in 2 is a big deal because it's the suicide mission, right? And you get this gigantic crew of 12 different companion characters so that you can go on this mission and hope that everybody makes it through. So I did that. I did all of their loyalty quests. I was able to save everybody at the end, did all the side missions. Great. Well, I'm gonna take a break. I'll come back for 3, but then I don't. I go back. I start 3 immediately because it's like, welp, I gotta do 3 now because I'm in it. I've been doing 3, and I've been doing all the main quests. We've resolved most of the giant intergalactic conflicts. The Reapers are, on a back heel. I've done the, Arrival DLC. I've done the Omega DLC. I've done basically all of the little subquests, and what I'm down to now is the Citadel DLC, which is definitely the kind of thing you want to do at the very end, because it's a nice little reunion thing for all of your characters. And then ultimately the last 2 main missions. Everything else is complete. And now that I'm there, I've found myself really reluctant to finish that last little part after having done all 3.
Now, the question I have for you, is this more of a I'm burnt out on Mass Effect?
No. I don't necessarily think it's that.
Then do you think it is I don't want to see the ending because I know that previously this ending was very lackluster and I've enjoyed myself up until this time?
There is the possibility that it is that, because I remember the experience of going through it the last time. And that the ending is a little bit of a come down. I also don't know if it's because this is the first time where I was able to play all 3 of the games back to back to back, and that there is a real possibility, and I think this might be what's happening to me, is that I don't really see myself ever going back to the trilogy again after this. So when I actually finish these last few quests, it's probably the last time I'm going to be experiencing Mass Effect, and this is after doing the whole trilogy in its entirety. So there's an ending. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is you need to write yourself a video essay about the trilogy.
Yes, there needs to be a trilogy about there needs to be a trilogy of video essays about the trilogy.
Because that's what these YouTubers do, is they write these video essays that are comprehensive about these games they play and why they like them and why they didn't like them. Then they get hundreds and thousands of views because people are like, what's this person say about this game? Anyway, sorry. Going off on a tangent.
Yes.
But if you're never going to play it again, then I assume you're going to do a Titanium Mind again about the Mass Effect Trilogy.
Yeah, that will be incoming, but I probably wasn't going to do that until I've actually finished all 3 of them. And I know that I'm finishing it, it's just that now every time I go to, pick it up, I'm like, is this going to be the last time I play Mass Effect? Literally thinking to myself, oh no, have I reached the end of my Mass Effect journey forever? Which is something I don't experience with a ton of different games, because you can play through them and you can think to yourself, oh, well, I'm going to go back, but am I really going to play the entire Mass Effect trilogy again at this point? I'm not a youngin anymore.
You're not a youngin anymore. I mean, not unless it's a decade later and they do something that you're really interested in, probably.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of those things, I want to play this game again, because I haven't played it in a decade. You know, Skyrim.
Right.
Oh, I want to play Skyrim again, because I haven't played it in a long time, and it's a great game.
Right. I think the one thing that's tricky, and maybe it's for games that are specifically like Mass Effect, where there's this through line narrative that goes through, is I know that picking it back up from the start is again going to kind of like drag me through doing the entirety of it. Not as much of like the pick up and play nature of a Skyrim, where I might be able to play it for a few hours or something, and then just put it down, because, you know, it's more about the exploration and the tooling around and figuring out what I can do. Mass Effect doesn't really work like that. Mass Effect is about this big, you know, intergalactic conflict with a lot of moving parts where you're integral to moving the story through, and as you're doing so, the characters and their storylines and the intricacies between all of these places keeps moving with you. So the whole narrative is pulled through as you're playing, without a lot of stops or, you know, detours to take.
You just need to go straight into Andromeda.
Well, see, I've thought about that. I have thought about going back to Andromeda, because I have not played that for a while. I feel like that is also going to be a bit of a letdown for me. I liked Andromeda fine, to be honest with you, but it is definitely not the original trilogy. It's a different thing entirely.
If it makes you feel any better, I think I tried Mass Effect 1, maybe Mass Effect 2.
Sure.
And,
Meh.
Not really my game of tea.
It was not your game of tea?
Yeah, I appreciated what they were trying to do with it and what they did with it, but, like, for me, especially that first one, was just too hard to play.
Yeah.
Like, I played it after it came out, like, years later, and I was just like, this gameplay is not great.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that there was even conversation when the Legendary Trilogy came out, which is like, do you have to play the first one? Because, yeah, it's still, from a gameplay standpoint, it's still a little rough compared to the later two. Like, there was a lot of heavy lifting in trying to do backstory for the universe when it came to the first game, and setting up all of these different alien races and their interconflicts between each other. And, like, they have to explain the genophage, they have to explain the Geth, and what happened with the Quarians, and why the Krogans don't like the Solarians, and what happened with the Rachni Wars, and what, like, they have to explain a ton of stuff. Yeah. By the time you get to 2, you know, it changes. Yeah. But, yeah.
I don't mind if they have tons of backstory they need to fill you in on, but I think it's better when it happens organically in a game.
Oh, I mean, I like to think that it happened, for the most part organically, just because so much of it is taking place during the actual through quest lines of the main game, where they reveal it. But even so, they created a very big universe with a lot of working parts that they have to establish. And they do it in the game, but it's a lot to establish.
Yeah.
Still. And it can.
They probably could have just dedicated the game to each part of that, but it's fine. It's fine. That's not what we're talking about today, though. Right.
The point is that now that I'm at the very, very end of 3, even though I was very motivated from the first part, like, oh, I was super excited, like, oh yeah, now I can finally take everything from 1 and I can go into 2, and I've taken everything from 2 and I can go into 3. Now that I'm at the very end, and I know that there's nothing past this, that this is the final, it's not just the last part of game 1 or 2, it's literally the end of the entire trilogy, I find myself really reluctant to do that last little bit. And started doing other things to distract myself from it. And I do have a feeling that it is because there is a certain level of finality to that is palpable. It is not going to be something that I really do past this.
Right.
And experience past this. I don't know if you've experienced that with games that aren't, Skyrim, or something like that.
I don't think quite in the same kind of way. I don't generally play these games that have, for 1, 2, and 3, that are a complete through line. And I haven't played a game like that probably since these games here, which are the dot hack games.
Yeah.
And I finished the original dot hack, not trilogy, it was a quartet, it was 4 of them, years ago, and I don't have a PlayStation 2 to play them on currently, so I can't. But, like, if I were to go and play those again, yeah, I'd want to play through. But they're not on different systems. They were still all made for the same system. You could import your data, but it was also more of a JRPG than the Eastern RPG. We've been over that before.
Right.
Where this one doesn't have any big choices you can make. You're going through the story. It's not like you're changing the story, you're just going through the story.
Right.
So that's not a big deal on that end. You'd still basically get the same through line either way.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot of games that I've played in recent decades that have done similar things to that.
Yeah.
Really, truly.
Are there any games that you kept saying that you wanted to go back to, and then you just never did?
There's a lot of games I go, I should play that again.
Yeah.
Sometime.
There's actually another game that I was thinking about that I have procrastinated about going back to for years, and that's Witcher 3, Wild Hunt.
Oh, I thought you were going to say World of Warcraft.
No.
The Wild Hunt is it's okay. I don't mind it. It's not a very good combat game.
The combat is the weakest part of the entire game.
It is. It is.
And everyone will, Geralt controls like a tank, for reasons that I still do not understand. But the thing is, I played it through to its entirety, and I knew that, like, when the show came back out a few years ago, on Netflix, that people were going back to it, and the sales were way up again, which is cool. But
You haven't played it in a number of years, have you?
No, because 2015-16, I think, is when I played it.
So, they've recently done a bunch of updates to it.
Ooh.
Like, graphically and everything.
Oh.
Which I had mods for that stuff.
Sure.
But they recently did a huge update for the systems and everything. Really? I saw it because I have it on Steam, so it's like, hey, we've got updates for The Witcher, we've got graphics, and you like all this stuff. And it's like, huh, okay. So maybe for you, and they've all been free updates too. Right. So maybe for you, not having played that in a while, maybe it would be worth it for you to see what they've done to it since then.
Oh, yeah. Oh
but,
no, it's a Legendary Edition all over again. It's my Mass Effect, but it's now with Witcher.
At least it's only the one game.
Yeah, it is. The thing is that one game is like 100 hours. So,
yeah.
And I think that the problem too, like, I played the expansions and everything, and I have to say that it's also one of those games where when you actually get to the very ending of the game, there is a certain finality to it, where you feel like everybody kind of comes to a conclusion, and there's something that does feel very final about what happens with Geralt and Ciri and, Yennefer and everybody. And then the very fun part at the very end is, if you have the Blood and Wine expansion, is that there's this very nice thing, assuming that Ciri has lived in that scenario, where Geralt can go to his vineyard on the new island and can just sit on the steps with Ciri for as long as you want. You can look out over the landscape, the Mediterranean kind of landscape that they have. It's a nice, very quiet ending to a very violent game world that they create. It's one of those things where there's like these handful of games that I played the first time and I was like, this is great. As a younger person, I was able to do that. And now, thinking about going back to it, I just have this reluctance to, because either I don't really know if I want to experience the ending of it again, or I'm worried that it's not going to be as good as it was. Spec Ops The Line is one of those. I like think about going back to it again, and it's like, oh, what if it's not good? Because now I know all the twists. I know all the twists.
Now the trick is you go back through it and look for all those little things that make more sense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like watching The Sixth Sense. Yeah, it's like watching The Sixth Sense.
Case.
Yes. So at any rate, I guess what I would ask for everybody else is if you've experienced this case of procrastinating about not finishing games, and why you think that might be happening for you. If it's just that you don't really like finishing games, or that you're reluctant to finish them because you remember them fondly, or you've heard so much about them and you don't want to have it ruined. That would be something I'd like to hear. Please let us know in the comments down below. What I wanted to talk to you about was one of the mechanisms that we might be able to use in games to try and help with both, the lore and also to expand upon quest lines. And that is the always fascinating town bulletin board.
Quest boards, notification boards. In World of Warcraft, they are command boards.
Yes. And I think it's interesting because we talked about Witcher 3 on the last segment, and there is town bulletin boards that Geralt will go up to, and he will get a bunch of quests, and this is where, like, the frying pan quests come in. These smaller ones that are just tasks that the Witcher is supposed to do, because the Witcher is an adventurer that's supposed to take on monsters and solve mysteries and stuff, and for money. And realistically, that's what your adventuring party typically does in a TTRPG, your tabletop gaming. But I think that the bulletin board has a tendency to get underutilized. You might remember that when we actually played Icefire Peak, the quests that we were given were laid out as if they were, choices you could make from a bulletin board. You would have the 3, and then the next 3, and then the ones after that. And that's fine. Like, I figured that quests were a good way of utilizing them. I figure, though, if you have a main quest that you're going on, you might have the interest of doing some, like, random side quests, or just ones that aren't fully fleshed out. Just some
odd jobs.
Yeah, odd jobs, sub-quests, like, stuff that you might be able to do along the way, like additional quest items. That was the other kind of thing I was thinking about, is like additional subjective objectives, I should say. Like, you'll see that in a few different games where there's going to be optional objectives that you can do. Doing that, but making that something that you might find out about on the bulletin board. So I'm going on the quest because there's a demon and it's terrorizing the town. But there is a little notification on the bulletin board when I go up and take a look at that. And, it just so happens that there's somebody who lost, a valuable gem, and it happens to be in the same place, or they lost it right around where the demon lair is, or the demon cave. Demon Caves or Us, whatever it's called. What would you call a demon lair?
A lair.
Okay. Hey, we lost them here, and now there's an additional objective, so if you're exploring the caves or the lair or wherever, maybe you come across that, and you can turn that in, and it's an additional objective that might get you an additional reward for something like that. I like the idea, though, just of having a bunch of different random quests that you could actually keep on the back burner, and then if people were to look at the bulletin board, somebody might say, hey, by the way, somebody keeps stealing my sheep. And while you're in town, like during downtime before you get on to the next leg of your bigger epic quest, you can go and figure out what's happening with the sheep. And then it could be one of those incomplete adventure quests that we were looking at before with the wolves or whatever. There was some other stuff, though, that I was thinking might be interesting to utilize the board for. And one of them was specific items for sale. So, like, for instance, once upon a time on the show, we talked a little bit about that slightly gently used magic items.
Yeah.
But let's say you don't have a whole store. You just have an item somebody's trying to pawn off on you. And they put up a notice where, well, they would put it on the town bulletin board. They would put it on the notice board. Got an item, it's this much gold. Come on down and check it out. Here's where I'm at.
Come on down to Crazy Frank's secondhand furniture store.
And it could even be just a residence, and just say, contact whoever, and maybe I work at one of the stores that's in town about this. And so now you can go and see if that's an item that you want, and that it might be useful, but for a limited time only, that you could utilize that. One of the other things that I thought would be useful was if you're doing investigations. If you have the investigation part where you're trying to solve a murder, or all of a sudden your quest line turns into an Agatha Christie novel, you might go to the town notice board, and you would look there to see if there are any people that are asking questions. Maybe if there's a murder in town, and you don't know who it is, somebody's left a notice about somebody who happens to be missing. Maybe it's the same person, they knew them personally, didn't realize that they had gotten murdered, so now you have somebody that you can interview, you have a lead, something to that effect. There's also a possibility of just using it to expand your information of the world or the town. If you're looking for services that are in town, if you want to know what this place is, if you're wondering what kind of structure it has for, like, a government, if it's a monarchy, if it's a democracy, or whatever.
I think a notice board or a bulletin board could be pretty useful. You could fill it with all kinds of things. Like, you can find real-world examples of this, especially in smaller towns or communities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know up north in Glen, at the post office at Patches, they have just a cork board, and you can put your notices of, I've got a service I'm offering, I've got these items for sale, or this thing going on, this event happening, here's a bunch of stuff, and people can go, you can, like, pull off the phone number on it, or they can just be like, oh, look, there's the thing, there's business cards, all sorts of things on these boards.
Oh, yeah. In my town, there's two. At the post office and in front of the town hall, so yeah.
Yeah, so, like, just picture it being something like that. Oh, yeah, so I'm gonna go to check out the town notice board, bulletin board, see what's there. Be like, there's services, there's items for sale, there are events going on in the town, anything that they need people to notice, but, like, stuff that's going to be happening that's not an event, but maybe it's a public notice kind of deal. All sorts of things. You can find so many ways to use that in a tabletop game, let alone using it in a video game to dole out quests without a quest giver actively being there.
Right. The random quests that you can do, goals and objectives. I just think that even when I've seen it utilized before, it's usually just for that, to move the main story along, and not to utilize it in a wide variety of other ways, of which it could be incredibly valuable, to the point where if you are saying that there are indeed notice boards in town, I would imagine that your adventurers might want to seek that out as one of their first things when they get into a new town, if you make it clear that that's there. And this gives you a wonderful swath of possibilities to lead them or suggest things that they might want to do that you have set up in the game. And if you have something that is kind of like side content, especially if, you haven't, I would never suggest that people haven't totally thought out their campaign from start to finish. But if you were trying to prepare some stuff for a larger conflict down the road, this would be a good time to distract them or deflect to do something else in the meantime before they move on to the next thing. And I do like the idea of setting it up also to be able to lead people to also lore and storylines and, even interpersonal stuff that's going to happen with the characters down the road. I don't know if you've utilized this kind of thing in games before, or if there is something similar that usually takes the place of this, like people at the bars or the taverns that usually do that.
Well, you can just put the bulletin board at the tavern where everyone congregates.
Oh, because everyone's going to go there anyway, so it
Exactly.
makes sense. Makes sense, put it right outside the thing. So then you take people's attention and you tell them, go look at that before you go into the... You see a bulletin board. Oh, okay.
As you enter the tavern, you see a big board out front that says notice on it.
Unless you have very incurious players, they will probably ask, what's on the board? And you can just tell them everything that's on the board, or certain things. And maybe, this is a fun adventure hook for everybody, because I know people love those. Let's say you have somebody that wants to investigate, does an actual investigation check on the notice board. They roll really good. What happens if they see something that seems a little bit like weathered, like it's been on parchment paper and it's been there for a very long time, and they notice that there's some writing that seems to be leaking through from the bottom, and when you turn it over, you see like a coded message that's on the back.
Well, then you need to know how to break that code.
Then you need to know how to break that code. Or it could just be a riddle that leads you to a location if you can solve it. And that might lead you to the Thieves Guild. Or,
there you go.
Yeah, or the Assassin's Guild, or something like that that's in town that you didn't even know existed. One of the secret societies that was using it to pass information along from one place to another. And that could be a quest line, or that could be a group that you interact with on a regular basis past that and gives you information. There's some interesting possibilities there, and I just feel like it's not used very often in tabletop gaming. I rarely see it implemented or even discussed, because most people have kind of gotten into the pattern of just saying, well, I'm going to go to the tavern. Or I'm just going to go here, because you get used to it, and rarely do you think about, that there'd be a one point of contact where people in that town, in that city, would be sharing information that might end up being valuable to you.
Well, I think that's definitely a good way you could do that in games to make it fit the world.
Sure.
To make it fit the theme of a small town. With a community that's just like, maybe something you notice on the notice board is just like a note. It's like, Jim, stop leaving your dogs out at night, it's rude. And then another passive aggressive note that's like, the dogs are supposed to be outside, they can handle the weather. And you see it back and forth, like maybe it'll inform you something about the couple of the residents in town, maybe like Jim's gone missing or something like that, and it'll be like, oh, well, this person was having interaction with Jim, they're clearly upset at him, you need to go look at them.
Sure.
I figure out who wrote this note.
Yeah. If nothing else, it might actually explain when you hear dogs barking in the middle of the night or something. like, oh, well, I guess that's not a werewolf. It's probably Jim. Well, in that vein, too, it might also help dissuade people who see a mystery and it's not actually a quest line or anything. Like you just happen to mention, just offhandedly, there are dogs barking off in the distance, and one of the players gets an idea in their head, ooh, are there werewolves or something? And then they see the notice, and it's like, oh, no, they're keeping their dogs out, and it's barking, and it's just annoying and stuff. And it's like, oh, I guess that's not a quest line. No, that's just background. Thanks for checking on that. I didn't want you to spend 15 hours trying to figure out why the dogs are just barking.
It's like, not everything's going to be a quest or something useful to the players. Some of it's just going to be background.
Sure. Sure.
It's like, in real life, do you ever go to those notice boards? Those boards you got? You said you have 2 in town. Do you go check them out often?
No, not often. No.
Yeah, and when you do check them out, do you read the entire thing?
No, I mostly just see things that are, catch my eye or that I might notice that are a little different than they normally are, because obviously they don't change a lot.
Yeah. So, if that's how you would deal with that in real life, and that's about how I would deal with it in real life, why would the player sit there and read the whole thing and expect everything to have to do with them?
Yeah.
But at the same time, players might read the whole thing expecting everything has to do with the quests and everything like that. Because that's kind of, as players, what we tend to do. Everything in the game has to have a purpose.
Yeah.
In some cases, you think, there's all this stuff on here, I need to absorb all of this information.
Yeah.
But if you want to add a little bit of realism, just have half of that stuff just be junk they're not even going to care about.
Right. Yeah.
You're taking 20 minutes to read this entire notice board.
Right.
Checking out every single little thing on it, taking it all, collecting that information. Like 3 pieces are relevant to anything you care about.
Exactly. One of the things that I actually find catching my eye is when there are dates on those notices, and especially because when the dates are already passed, like a month or two ago, I realize that the people don't, micromanage that board at all. They have a tendency to not actually bother to take stuff down after it's passed.
It's a set it and forget it.
Yeah, exactly. One of these days, I think there actually are people in town that will periodically go through and just kind of go, oh, I guess these aren't relevant anymore, and we'll take it down so that it's not entirely cluttered and the relevant information is up. But it's not often, so you just end up with these things. It's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Oh, April. Oh, never mind. I guess it was probably pretty interesting at the time. There's a lot of information I think you can glean from it, and a lot of information that you could give to players by utilizing something of that nature, and it can be a good starting point to do a wide variety of different things that might lead them down interesting paths if you wanted them to go on it. As one single point of contact in order to spur your players off in a bunch of different directions, I think it would be much better utilized than it currently is. What do all of you think out there in television land?
YouTube land.
Wherever you happen to be living. You go ahead and tell us if you use a bulletin board or if there is another method that you prefer to use to dole out different kinds of pieces of information or clues, little hooks to your players when you're playing a game.
Yeah, what do you use to get this useless information across to your players?
Yes. What's the giant book of useless information that you like to throw at your players? Guinness. There's just a copy of the Guinness World Records on the ground somewhere.
Absolutely useless.
Perfect. Alex, as you may be aware, I like myself a farming sim once in a while.
Sure, I can get behind a farming game once in a while. I think we have different styles of farming games we like.
Yeah, I think I like more of the life farming sims, the Stardew Valleys and the Harvesty Moons. Well, not
which
really
are not
Harvesty
the kind
Moons.
I typically like.
No, you like Farming
like
Simulator.
Farming Simulator, but at the same time, I will say I have talked with Crave about this several times. Farming Simulator would benefit from having a fucking storyline.
Yes, it sure would. Sure would.
I think we've talked about this before as well. I don't like sandbox games. I don't mind sandbox games. But I don't like it if the only goal in a sandbox game is, there's no penalties.
Right.
It's just make as much of whatever currency or whatever as you want. There are no goals. There's no thing you can do. There's no end goal. There's no story. There's just, you do what you want and you do it. And there's not really, the only thing holding you back, like in Farming Sim, is, oh, I want this new tractor, but I need to make enough money to buy the tractor. Let's just farm until I make the money to get the tractor, and then I can do more farming.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's an infinite money loop, and eventually even ones with stories will kind of, in endgame, become that, production farms. On that note, of having a storyline. Like, I do like actually having storyline and having towns and people that exist and having more of a world that is built around the idea of the farm. But what I have started to realize, you know, as I also do gardening myself and, you know, try to raise crops in my backyard, is that none of these games actually prepare you for actually farming. In the real world, they don't really give you a realistic interpretation of farming. Like for instance, in the typical game that you go through, the idea is that you plant all of your little plants in the ground, and then you water them. And if you water them every day, they're all going to come up at the same time. And you've succeeded, and now you can harvest every one of your crops. They don't tell you that what's more likely going to happen is you go and you try to water them consistently, and then some of them just start to die, and other ones are fine. And then you have to ask yourself, like, what's possibly wrong? At no point in, like, Stardew Valley, or really any of these games that I've played, do they ever kind of go, hey, what's your soil quality like? What's the nutrients that you're using? Do you have pests? Or are there spots on the plants that are causing it to wilt? Is it actually waterlogged? Have you watered it too much? How's your drainage? Is it loamy soil or sandy soil? How much light are you getting? What's the pH level there? Like, you know,
I feel like you need one of those more in-depth simulation farming games.
Yes, I need a backyard garden simulator where they actually get into the weeds.
Literally into the weeds. I
Yes.
assume one of those more like grow your own marijuana simulator games might have this in-depth thing.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe. I'm trying to think. I think the closest I ever saw was, what was it, 100 Days? Did you ever play? Which was the winemaking.
I finished that one.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
No.
No, the storyline ends very quickly. You can play beyond it, but in that, though, they do tell you a little bit about different diseases that your plants can get and ways that you can protect against it and stuff like that. And the heat, the temperature and stuff can affect it. The terroir of the world where you're growing your grapes can affect it. But not in like the actual down to the basics, because like I have whole bins that I've built, and I'll put tomatoes in there, and I'll have 5 tomatoes, and 3 of them will look terrific, and the other 2 have pretty much wilted to dust, and they're in the same place, and in the same soil, in the same area, and I don't know why. Like, you prep them the same way, and they're just, some of them just decided, no, not today, sorry, can't help you. Where I'll have plants that were doing really great, and they were super happy, and I changed nothing about how I cared for them, and all of a sudden, they've just decided to wilt. They decided to fall over, and they don't want to play this game anymore before they've done anything. I've had ones where I've moved them to different locations thinking that they could get more sun or more heat in certain areas, and they just keep saying, nope, I've given up. Like, the plants have just given up on you. That they'll have too much sun, too little sun, they've gotten too shady, there's not enough heat, there's not enough light, there's, and then you say to yourself, oh, cool, well, I'll put a lot more. Look, I just drench it full of water, and then I'll put more fertilizer in it, and it's gonna be terrific. And then the plant goes, no, actually, I like that less. Please don't do that anymore. And you don't understand.
Yeah, it's almost like plants are temperamental.
Plants can be temperamental, especially after, like, you get a really heavy rain, because as we talked about on the last episode, we've been getting some very heavy rains, and some of the plants love it. And they just spurt right up and they're happy as can be. And then other plants decide that it's a wonderful time to just die. they just die. like some kind of condition is not being met, and when you do actually get into the, the literal weeds of gardening, you realize that there's all of these different things that you have to be accounting for, from like the quality of the soil to the nutrients in the soil and the actual acidity of the soil and how much light they're all getting and protecting them from various critters, which I've now put a giant fence around my whole garden trying to keep out the deer, because when I used to have healthy plants, the deer came along. I never had the thing in those games where the deer just randomly come through and decide I'm gonna eat half of your crops.
Yeah, I feel like you could make a whole game out of just gardening for realsies.
Yeah, you really could. You could.
A lot of games that have gardening or farming make it a lot more simplified.
Yeah, they do. They do. I think they try to touch on some of this. Like, I remember in Stardew Valley, there is a thing where if you don't put out scarecrows in certain areas, the little crows will come down and occasionally eat some of your seeds, and then you'd have to regrow them. But nothing prepares you for the moment where you go out into your garden and you've put this giant fence and all these obstacles in the way so that the deer can't get in, and then something has still eaten the tops of all of your squash. Like, what did that?
Yeah, it's some bug.
Something decided to lop off the leaves and eat them all, and where'd they go? And how'd that happen? What did that? These are questions that I would actually really love it if there was some game that could explain to me what the hell's going on and how you could fix it. Give me that game. I need a garden game where I can literally just plant the individual plants and then there's just random things that happen to them, and then it explains how you solve the problem. That would be very educational for me.
So, what we need is an educational garden game.
Yes.
But also, like a deep sim, like not a life sim, like not a job sim, like a deep simulation gardening game.
Yes.
We need to call it Deep in the Weeds.
Deep in the Weeds. There we go.
We need to call it Deep in the Weeds because there's so many ways you can take that, and it's perfect for this game. And what it is it teaches you actually how to garden.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can do this. It's one of those, it's almost like an idle game. At this point, because what you have to do is come back every day and play it.
Right. You have to be on a schedule. It has to almost be like the mobile game schedule in order for it to work. But it can't, the problem is that they'll never make it because you can't do that thing where you monetize it out with a premium currency so that it just auto-fixes your plants.
You can. You premium currency sell misters and things like that will water your plants.
Yeah.
Jason.
Oh no! What have we done? No! We've created the next monster. What have we done?
Okay. But I think the reason that a lot of games skimp out on these more in-depth mechanics, if you will, is because I feel like most people who don't want to actually garden but want to play a game about gardening don't want to have to deal with checking the pH and base value of their soil and checking out the nutrient levels of their phosphorus and nitrogen, and they don't want to take out fertilizer and mulch, and they don't want to be checking like, oh, my thing's getting eaten. What's eating the leaves? Is it June bugs? Is it ladybugs? Is it deer?
Yeah.
What's eating all my blueberries? Is it a bear that came along and was like, ooh, blueberries?
Yeah. The bear just came through and decided, ooh, those look tasty. Now what are we gonna do? I keep trying to figure this stuff out in real life, and I think that it would be a very interesting game. You have to think of it as garden game, but on survival mode, where it literally is like trying to figure out how to make these things grow.
Garden survival, yeah. Where the goal of the game is to make your garden survive.
Yes. We can create a whole new genre.
But then if you want to make it even more something that's pertinent, you also need your garden to survive so that you can have food to survive yourself.
Oh yeah, because you only have so many rations, and you're gonna start to need
Feast or famine.
feast or
Names.
famine. There you go. Good. You know what we end up doing? We
Planting potatoes.
I was gonna say mushrooms.
Oh, I mean, yeah, they're not even plants at that point.
No, there's no, but you still need to get right conditions and times
Yes.
a year and stuff in order to make those work. You know,
Yeah.
they're still temperamental. I kept thinking
Yeah.
about doing stuff like that, but the problem is that again, you need to have the right kind of wood for them to grow on. You need to have the right kind of moisture content. They need a lot of shade. They need to have underbrush. They need to some of them grow in the ground, some of them grow in stumps. So yeah, I mean, just you have to pick what food you're going to do, and then you have to make it work. Yeah, there's I think the reason why they don't do this in a lot of games too is because there is a certain level of complexity that most people don't want to get into when they're playing a game. There is a certain surface level of mechanics that you can get through that you can deal with on a day-to-day basis when you are playing a game, but when you get any deeper than that, where we have to really start looking at all of these factors, I know it has a tendency to make me tune out because, you know, I've played like Crusader Kings. When you start getting into the myriad of different mechanics, it just becomes a blur for most people. You have to know how to implement them. You need to know how to introduce them over the course of time. I think that the one nice thing, though, with our, you know, feast or famine that we're going with here, the one nice thing is that there is an order of operation to it. Like, you can start very simply about, like, the process of actually planting your seeds in the ground, and then after a couple days, another issue arises, and you introduce a new mechanic, and that comes up, and then a couple days later, another mechanic comes up. When you start to wonder, hey, why is it that I just planted, another real world thing, by the way, why is it that I got this bed together and I planted a bunch of seeds and only 2 of like the 12 seeds came up?
Yeah.
Out of that. Now you can
what
ask
you do
those
is
questions.
you have a game where it's like a simple Stardew Valley type game. It's like, oh yeah, plant a garden. And so you go and you take the seeds and you plant it in the soil.
Yeah.
And then you water it and you come back. And you come back, and you come back, and you go, why isn't it growing? And it goes, you just put the seeds in the soil?
Yeah.
It's like, you didn't check the pH level, you didn't do this, that, or the other thing? Did you remember to get your seeds to sprout first?
Right. Did you remember that you're actually, those are supposed to actually soak in water for 24 hours before you actually put them in the ground? Did you know that? Did you think about that? No?
Did you think about that? And it's like, no, I didn't. So it's like, it makes it seem like the game is going to be about more than just farming or gardening, but then it's like, no, we're doing in-depth gardening.
Yeah, this is punishing gardening. Sorry folks, this is the real deal. we're getting down to and what they eventually do is like kind of go, oh, I guess we got to start raising cows so we have manure so that we can place manure in the ground. What you end up doing is trying to raise as many goats as you possibly can, because they'll weed the garden and then also give you fertilizer in pelletized form. All sorts of wonderful things. Then you actually have a real farming simulator.
There you go.
Folks, we got to do that, because as far as I remember, Farming Simulator doesn't really do that. They mostly like say, here's the crops you can put in, and
they added some more realistic things in there at some point. I don't remember exactly what it is. It has to do with like the something, I don't know, I didn't look into it. Agricultural stuff that you can measure, but like I didn't look into it yet. I haven't played in a little while, so
sure.
Again, it's the point of, wow, this game is really fun occasionally until it's really boring.
Right. Well, I mean, we could theoretically, in this garden game that we're putting together, we could put a storyline. That whole thing about, like, you literally have to do it to survive. Like, we're playing Castaway. Farmcore. Yep. We're gonna create a new genre at the end of this all. But I guess my takeaway is just real life farming is different than game farming, and I'm sure that we could say that about almost every single genre of game. Real life is not the same as gaming, folks. And there's a lot of factors that you don't account for when you're playing. So, if anyone out there happens to know of a game that might be like the one we're talking about, please let me know so that I can be directed to it and try it out. Tell us what you'd like to see in a gardening game that actually makes you hate the idea of gardening. This is, you know what we've created? We've created Fear and Hunger, but as a garden game.
There you go.
Literally, Fear and Hunger, but as a gardening game. It's great. It's an immersive sim now. Alex, this has been another successful show, for Total Pebble Knockdown.
Some would say.
Well, it's complete.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I consider that a success.
This has completed your journey. Thanks for checking out our bulletin board.
Yes, exactly. You can turn in your quests now. There was a thing on the bulletin board about how they needed help with gardening, and then you go on a whole sub-quest. Yeah.
It started off with a seed pack, and it ended with you throwing the entire farm in the fire.
Yeah. Oh, you know what it was? You started with a seed pack, turned out to be a bunch of magic beans. And then that started a whole other quest. Yeah, to get the golden goose. Anyway, so Alex, if folks wanted to learn a little bit more about whatever we were talking about on the show, where could they go?
You could go to totalpebbleknockdown.com.
And when you are there, you can check out our Patreon. We have early releases of all of our videos there, as well as additional content that you don't usually hear on the show. And you can also check us out on every podcast app known to mankind. Rate and review where it is applicable. It really helps us out. And make sure to check us out on social media. I am at Titanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and our show is at Pebble Knockdown.
And check us out for all of your pebbly needs. And with that said, pebbles are not something that I normally grow in the garden, actually.
No, you try to keep those out of the garden, but they keep getting back in.
I know. You know what? I think they had a mind of their own. You gotta be careful of those. But anyway, if you have a pebble garden, good for you. It's easy to maintain. That's what I'll say. Folks, thank you for joining us on Total Pebble Knockdown, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.
Bye for now. Get that garden.
Ugh.